Welcome to Manchester Art Gallery, which is about to open the first truly comprehensive exhibition of a very wonderful photographer who just so happens to be my mother, Dorothy Bohm. It's called A World Observed, 1940 to 2010. A World Observed was actually the title of her very first book, published way back in 1970, but we thought it was appropriate to revisit that title and indeed update it with a vengeance. So I guess the question is, turning to my mother, Dorothy, why Manchester? Why is it so appropriate that it should be Manchester?
I feel very privileged to have this major retrospective, the first one I've had in my long life, for it to be in Manchester. I came to Manchester as an escapee from Nazi Europe, and I came to Manchester partly because my father, who was an industrialist, had a vertical mill in Lithuania, and all the raw cotton came from Manchester, so it was quite a natural thing to come to Manchester. I arrived here at the age of 16, still somewhat traumatized by what I'd seen happening in Europe. I became interested in photography a little earlier on, having seen some wonderful work, and I enrolled at the Manchester College of Technology. I started to work at the age of 18. I was good at portraiture, and I got a job in a leading Manchester studio. And from then on, it became not only my profession, but my passion. And I also met the man who was going to share my life. He also came from Europe. He had also lost his family, and he remained my partner for nearly 60 years.
And we should perhaps tell everybody that the exhibition is dedicated to his memory. There's a little sort of plaque at the beginning to mark that.
And we decided to start a studio, a very modest studio, because everything was difficult to get. And believe it or not, it was Studio Alexander, just off Market Street, not far from the Manchester Guardian.
It's, I think, now where the big branch of Boots is, very familiar, bang in the centre, isn't it? I think the junction of Cross Street and Market Street.
And from the day we opened, it worked. And so I was a breadwinner. And at, how old was I, 21? It was all right. I liked people, and I thought that everyone had something good about them, and I'll try and get it out when I photograph. And the nicest thing that happened to me was many years later in the south of France, a woman came up to me and said, "I'm very grateful to you." And I said, "Why?" She said, "You photographed me in your Manchester studio, and you gave me back my self-confidence."
We have a reconstruction of the studio with a whole array of portraits, and what's actually rather exciting at the moment, of course, is that people are recognising the sitters and approaching the gallery saying, "Yes, this is my aunt, this is my great-aunt," whatever. But then you've got an extraordinary contrast as you walk through to the first, or the second room, I should say, where you have these very lyrical images of Lago Maggiore, where Ascona was situated, a sense of discovering the delights of photographing in the open air.
You see, during the war, it was mainly in the studio. We didn't photograph outside. I did a few photographs of what was the industry, textile industry, and people working in conditions which weren't all that easy, but never mind. The light, I discovered the light.
There's also the sense of capturing the moment that will never reoccur, which is more, becomes the hallmark of any photographer to some extent, but your work in particular, perhaps. You and my dad, you've travelled an awful lot, and I think it's very striking in the exhibition. Huge array of geographical locations, yet a sense that actually humans are the same the world over.
Well, I was told that once, that I don't photograph so much the difference, but the similarity. So a mother and child in Mexico would be the same as a mother and child in England, say.
What we've tried to do is capture precisely what you're saying through thematic groupings, particularly in the black and white work, where they fall more naturally into those groupings. So we have landscape, we start with portraiture, we have landscape, we have images, almost architectonic images of the city, as you mentioned. Then we move to images of children around the world, moving through to women, and then indeed to men. And then there's a break, we mark it with a rather different, dramatically different coloured wall to mark a transition into colour. So do tell us about that in the early 1980s.
Well, she had started photographing at 16. By the time I came to early 1980s, I felt that I'd really done everything I wanted to say in my black and white photography. I'd always been very influenced by color. I went to New York and met somebody that I liked very much, a very famous pioneer of photography, André Kertész, the Hungarian, who's one of the world's finest photographers. And he was working with Polaroid. I'd become friends with him. And I got fascinated by these amazing small images. And I came back, and at Christmas, I asked for a Christmas present, could I have a Polaroid? And color with a Polaroid was something extraordinary. And I had to limit myself to what I actually saw, because with another camera you can move and include this and that. Here you had to be absolutely precise within the image, the small image. Anyhow, you've got some samples of it, and I really feel that color is my medium. I love the black and white, but I couldn't go back. And there's a certain childlike joy in discovering something that I may have seen many times and that was suddenly transformed by a light or by my way of seeing it. I don't know what it is. But there's sometimes I go back to a place that I photographed and it had changed completely. My inspiration have not really been other photographers, although those that have a certain poetry in them, I do. Like Manuel Alvarez Bravo, the Mexican, André Kertész, and not to forget Cartier-Bresson and Brandt. But on the whole, my inspiration has been the early films of Antonioni and
Fellini, you've always admired, haven't you?
whose work I loved, and also looking at art. But I grew up and started photography when it was very difficult to get film, even cameras and so on. So I had to limit myself, and that stayed with me. I think it's quite a good thing. You don't just take a photograph hoping it's going to be all right.
Seeing this, I suppose, a kind of summation of your life's work, it's an awfully, it's a long, wonderful career. How does it feel walking around the exhibition?
I'm amazed. I can't really believe that I did all that. I've had exhibitions before, but they've usually been thematic. So much easier. And this is a sort of survey of 70 years. And to think that I can still photograph, I'm thrilled to be able to do it. To still see things that excite me. There's a certain excitement in catching a moment. At times I've stood somewhere and thinking, this could be the background, but I was waiting for something to happen. And as I say, I've been very lucky. Something did happen and it made the picture.
Good, that seems a nice point at which to end. Thank you very much.